How would we define, explain innovation anyway, simply? Well, one of the things that a lot of writers in innovation do, and Phil Schlechty does as well, is differentiate invention from innovation. And he says, and other people have said this as well, invention is the process of creating something new, whereas innovation is a process of installing it, putting it to work, making it be realized, implementing in some way. I just read an interesting example of this just in the past week. And I didn't know this, some of you may know it, but Corning, you know, the glass people, had created this super durable glass that came to be called Gorilla Glass, I mean, several decades before the iPhone came out. But it was sitting on the shelf because they hadn't found a use for it. Steve Jobs was carrying around a prototype of the iPhone with a plastic screen, and he was perturbed because it kept getting scratched, and he wanted a different kind of cover. And he somehow got on to Corning and their Gorilla Glass, and their invention became part of a very serious innovation in that realm. So putting something to work, making it happen. An invention could be just a wonderful idea. So it's something new. It could be a process, it could be a product. IDEO, increasingly in the past several years, has moved to the design of processes. They were first known for product innovation and design. I want you to look at a couple pictures here briefly, because in engaging students, and in a couple of his earlier books, Phil Schlechty references two kinds of innovation. And he credits another writer, Clayton Christensen. Do any of you know Clayton Christensen's work? The most recent piece is in education. It's Disrupting Class. But his earlier works, he's an economist, a business person, were The Innovator's Dilemma in the late 1990s, and then The Innovator's Solution. But Phil has taken his notion of the difference between a sustaining innovation and a disruptive innovation and applied it to education. And we think it's a very useful distinction for leaders like yourself to make, and I'll try and explain why. But here, think about sustaining. In your own mind, you don't have to say it out loud, but think of the words that come to mind when you hear the connotations you carry for the word sustaining. And then in contrast, think of the words, the images, the feelings that come to mind with disruptive. And I'm going to suggest we have to consider those prior associations as we learn anew what Phil Schlechty and others mean by disruptive and sustaining innovations. Probably, did you think of things like this? Sustaining is positive. You know, it's nurturing, it's nourishing in common understandings. And disruptive is disorderly, chaotic, tsunami. You know, you think tsunami and hurricane and all those things. However, we have to think about disruptive and sustaining a little bit different in terms of innovation. What Phil says, drawing and adapting Clayton Christensen's work, is that sustaining innovations are compatible with the current system. When somebody said they thought this central office was really about continuous improvement, often our efforts in the line of continuous improvement are sustaining innovations. We come up with something new, but it works just right in the current system. It requires little change in role, in rules, and in the relationship between roles. You don't have to rethink those. The organization is just fine as it is. And they can probably be installed without leadership because they don't have to do with the moral order, with the big purpose of the organization. I'll give you a couple examples. Long time ago, in the Middle Ages, when I was teaching high school. 1982, I spent 4.5 weeks in the summer with a group of teachers learning about writing process instruction. Okay, it was a very big change in my world as a teacher. and in the teachers, in the worlds of the elementary and middle school teachers who went through it with us. And we were supported throughout the year. But I went back to my classroom, and it was a big deal to me. But it didn't make any difference to the rest of the school. I was in a big 2,200 kid high school. My principal said, oh, that's nice. It didn't cost him any money, you know, and I didn't have to get out of school during the school year. So it didn't touch the organization. I would say that's an example of sustaining innovation in education. You know, when you run off and you learn a new computer program that's going to help you merge all the data for, you know, student attendance and student achievement and suspension, that could be very important, but it doesn't require a change in the organization. In contrast, disruptive innovations require that the existing system change, that roles, rules, and relationships, the norms around those have to be altered, and it requires leadership to do that. A single teacher can't do that. And we would suggest courageous individual principals can make important changes in their building, but if they are going to really take hold, it probably needs the larger support of the district, of the organization. And these take more time. If I'm going to learn a new computer program, you can send me to school for 5 days. I can come back and use it. If you're going to transform public schools to support kids in new ways, to become places where digital learning is the norm, okay, that's going to require time, and it's going to require leadership throughout the organization. A couple of examples from the rest of the world. One is, think about cell phones, okay? In the 50s, it was a sustaining innovation when we didn't have an operator connect our lines. I lived in a small town. And when we no longer had party lines, I grew up with party lines, you know, everybody spying on everybody else's conversations. That was a sustaining, and then we got touch tone at some point in the 60s. And then we got these little princess phones. It was really cool, okay? Well, this morning in the paper, it said legislation is changing in many states where no longer are communications companies going to be required to have landline services everywhere. Because look what cell phones have done. That has disrupted the existing order and way things operate in huge ways. So has digital music, okay? Sometimes I mourn, although I understand it's the way of the world, that my favorite music stores are closing, okay? They don't exist anymore. I mean, I grew up with 78s. And then we went to long play, and then we had our little 45s. And I remember when our family bought its first stereo. Today, holding on to music in that way, you know, is pretty much going to be a thing of the past, or for collectors, perhaps. So digital downloads and sharing is a disruptive innovation. The reason this matters, the reason it's really important for leaders to understand that there is a difference is because sometimes we treat initiatives and innovations that are really potentially disruptive as if they're sustaining. And Phil coined this term, and he said what we do is we domesticate them, okay? We take something powerful, like the working on the work framework, that says it matters if kids are engaged. It matters if they respond to their work. It requires teachers to become designers. And we take it and we shove it into the current system without making any other changes. So then we hear things like this. Principals ask us, so can I change my evaluation system and go in and observe if the design qualities are playing out, are being utilized in the classroom? Or can I write on the form, you know, what percentage of the kids are engaged? You see what's happening? These aren't bad people, but they have not rethought the whole system in that way. And teachers say, well, my principal sent me to this workshop to learn about engagement, but then I'm supposed to spend 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, doing mandatory preparation, okay, for a state test? I don't know. You know, so looking at the whole piece, and I am not naive, but to say that the changes required that for the description that's in the Texas Vision will not come with a wave of a magic wand. It's going to be piece by piece, but it certainly won't happen unless leaders like yourself understand the nature of the change to be undertaken.